So you started a podcast as well.
I started in January.
Uh-huh.
In fact, Penguin helped me launch it because they, and I did it without much thought.
Mm-hmm.
The first 6 episodes, and then Apple picked it up. They started promoting it. It sort of was number 1 on iTunes in the UK for about 2 weeks.
Wow.
And again, I appreciate it just launched, so these things are all skewed metrics.
Yeah, well, they kind of overly inflate in the early
it.
days so that people can discover it. I mean, I think it's good. So that's how
it's
you
good, and
discover new shows.
it's doing really well. So most episodes go to number 1 on health.
That's great.
And so I love it though.
It's fun, right?
It's the best because you have conversations, and I've done so much work on the BBC where they just edit everything, and ultimately what ends up coming out is a filtered version of what you actually said.
Right.
And I think, well, I can talk to anyone I want about anything, whoever
For as long as you want to.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to figure out how to. There was no master plan. It just happened, but now I realize I enjoy it. So I'm trying to figure out, okay, how do I build a structure and a system around this?
Right.
Which is tricky.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk to you about that. I mean, I'm always trying to figure out that equation as well, because once you start to get into it, you realize well, this is actually, there's quite a bit that goes into it to do it well, and it takes a lot of work.
Yeah, well, what it's done
support.
It's given us focus. I kind of, at least every Wednesday now, where a newsletter goes out, social post goes out, it's show notes go now. Show notes didn't exist at first. People kept saying, I said, show notes? Okay, right. I'm barely getting this out. But my PA now is sort of trying to do that as well. So I feel it's growing. I feel it's something I feel I really want to own it and actually personalize it a bit more. So I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you figure out what it wants to be in the doing of it,
Yeah. I love the title, Feel Better, Live More. I love it. And it kind of encompasses me and what I'm about. But I think I can make more of it. And we're going to do some live events around it. Penguin are delighted with, and because I signed a 2-book deal with them. So we're going to do some live events around the UK to start with,
right,
which I'm looking forward to. I know you've done a few of those.
Yeah, a couple of them.
But
it's great. I mean, I know you're kind of in town doing some press around the new book and all of that, and you just came from KTLA, so I watched that a couple minutes ago before you arrived. And it's that classic thing. It's like you're there for 3 minutes, and it's like you can just spit out like, okay, here are the 4 pillars, and then you're out, right?
You're out. You can't really get into it, but that's live telly.
But it's different.
Yeah, but I came out for the Feel Good Summit. Really, Mark's business partner Drew. I think you know Drew.
Yeah, I know Drew.
Yeah, I really like Drew. I feel he's one of the guys I think in my entire life who I've met who seems to be really in touch with who he is. He seems to. I get that impression anyway. Sort of, and I always come away from the interactions with him feeling like a better person, feeling like I know what I've got to do, and I kind of really enjoy it. He invited me out to come and speak, and Mark did, to be fair. And once I knew I was coming, then I thought, okay, let me try,
tag on a few things
if I can, if I'm going to have time away from the family and my wife and my kids, I'm not here for a vacation,
right?
Basically, even though
I get it.
I went on a bird in Venice, having said that, with a buddy yesterday, which is good fun.
That's cool. So I woke up this morning feeling super lousy, on the verge of getting sick, and I almost never ever get sick, almost never. And if I do, when it starts to come on, like it was this morning, I can usually kick it in a day. But it made me sort of, knowing that I was going to speak to you today, I was like, all right, well, where am I in the 4 pillars? And it's like, okay, well, my diet's pretty good. Movement, I'm probably moving too much, if anything. Relaxation, I'm completely failing in that. And sleep, I probably give myself a B-, C+ right now. It's a great little cheat sheet for taking inventory of where you're at. And it's like, I know I'm overextended right now. My adrenals are fried. I'm exhausted from travel. It's no shock that I wake up and feel lousy. So here I have the good doctor to diagnose me.
Have we started, by the way?
Yeah, we started.
Oh my God. I didn't realize.
We're rocking.
Oh my God. I had no idea we'd actually started. We're just chatting. Okay.
That's all right.
What I think the 4-pillar framework for me it's just something I can apply, you can apply, my patients can apply. It's just a simple way of looking at your own health, right? And figuring out which one of these 4 areas do I need the most work in? Because I think most of us intuitively know. Most of us have kind of got a pretty good idea. Actually, my diet's pretty good, but I'm not sleeping so well. And I love it because people get confused and bombarded with health information all the time now. You go on the internet, there's a million blogs out there. Often they're saying conflicting things. People get paralyzed. They just don't know what to do with this information. Half of my job as a doctor when people come in is to say, okay, guys, you're confused. Okay, let me try and simplify this down for you. And I know there's a deceptive simplicity to those 4 pillars, but I really feel it's deceptively simple because I've seen how life-changing it can be when people apply those in their own life. And it takes the pressure off people. It's not about a perfect diet. It's not about, the perfect gym routine. It's about doing enough in each area. And I'd like to think it takes the pressure off people anyway. Well, I think, just for people that are listening, when we're talking about the 4 pillars, we have relaxation, sleep, movement, and food, right? And what's great about the book is that it really is super accessible. And it's like, this is not, you don't have to stretch and try to adhere to some kind of protocol that only few people are going to be able to master. This is basic stuff. But I think, when I'm reading it, I'm like, okay, I get that. This is top level things. But it's that gap between the information and the action where I think most people stumble. It's like, okay, yeah, I know I need to get a good night's sleep. Most nights I don't, though, right? Yeah. Well, that's a huge issue. That's one of the big issues in health. There's all this great information out there. There's great public health messages often, and people aren't following them. Why are people not following them? And I've got many thoughts on that. But specifically, the approach I take with these 4 pillars, particularly when I was writing the book, is how can I make it accessible to people? How can I write it in such a way? How can I pepper it with real life case studies from my practice that hopefully people can relate to and see how just making some simple changes in those 4 key areas can have such a profound effect. And, we can all have a fantastic outcome when we do a 10-day diet of some sort, right? When we exclude everything from our diets, we can feel better in 10 days, okay? Many of us can do that, but I'm interested in what changes can I help someone with that is going to work for them today in the short term, but it's also going to work for them in 1 month, in 6 months, in 12 months? And how can I help them build in this lifestyle change over a period of time? And that really has come from my practical experience. What I put out in the book is literally nearly 20 years of experience of seeing patients. And it's not just what the science says. The science is important to me. But what's even more important to me is actually what works in real life. What will a busy mother do who feels that they've got no time to look after themselves and they're just running around, just doing for their kids, maybe for their partner, maybe for their elderly parents. They just go, right? I'm interested in how can I connect with her so that she feels, yeah, I can do that. And that's why I've tried to make all the recommendations simple and achievable. And I'll tell you, one of the most fun things for me that I've had fed back to me since the book came out is that people feel that as they're reading it, that, oh, I want to do that. I can make that change. And that makes me excited because I'm not telling people to go on a punishing diet. I'm not telling people to go on a grueling workout regime. I'm recommending some very simple things. And why I think simple is important, because we as human beings, we like to feel good, right? If I set the bar low and we meet that feels good. I've done what the doc
right. You create an emotional engagement with that process where the patient feels empowered.
Yeah, I give you a prime example of that is in the move pillar. Okay, so just in case people aren't familiar, there's 4 pillars, and there's a quarter on each of them in the book. In the move pillar, I talk about all kinds of recommendations, but one of my favorites is something to do with strength training. So I think strength training is very much undervalued in society. We don't think about it enough. And, your lean muscle mass, it independently predicts your mortality. It absolutely determines in a huge part how we're going to be as we get older. And a few years ago, I was in my practice and I'd read all the research on it. And I thought, I'm going to tell my patients about strength training. I remember this guy came in and I said, it's really important for your blood sugar balance, but also for your overall health that we do a bit of strength training. And he goes, what does that mean, doc? I said, well, you really maybe do some resistance at the gym, maybe 30, 40 minutes, 3 times a week. He goes, all right, okay, I'll try. He came back maybe 4 weeks, 6 weeks later. And I said, how are you getting on? I said, you know what, doc? I really want to, but, work's busy. The gym's not on the way back from work. I just not got around to it. And I thought in that instant, well, what's going on here? I didn't think, why is he not doing what I said? I always thought, I'm not giving him advice in a way that he feels is applicable to him in the context of his life. Mm-hmm. And in that moment, I came up with this 5-minute kitchen workout, basically, which is, okay, I need to make it accessible for him. And I literally took my jacket off and I was literally teaching him 5 moves that he could do. And I said, I literally want 5 minutes twice a week. And that was the start for him. And literally, he loved it. And he's now doing, 2 hours of strength training a week, but you right. start off with that. And
I'd make it super digestible.
Super digestible. I had a couple in their 60s recently. Same thing. They were so skeptical, Rich. They came out of the consultation with me thinking, really? That's what I need to do? And I said, guys, I'll tell you what, I'm going to see you back in 4 weeks. Please try and do these 5 exercises in your kitchen, right? You don't need to join a gym. You don't need to change. You don't need to buy any equipment, right? They went away. This is a couple in their 60s. And they came back 4 weeks later. And I said, how are you guys doing? They said, Dr. Chassie, we love it. It's changed our lives. We started off doing it in the kitchen, but now we do it every night for 10 minutes on our upstairs landing as we run our evening bath. And I learn from my patients. I love reading the science, but getting people better in real life doesn't come from reading scientific papers. Mm-hmm. There is a difference. So how do you convert that into real actionable information for people? And that's what I'm passionate about. That's what, you see all these wars on social media about what the new science says and what the science says, and I read them all, right? But often we just divide people, we confuse people on what they should be doing. And I've tried to come up with a program and a philosophy in this book where it's as relevant to, let's say, a vegan as it is to a meat eater. Mm-hmm. It is as relevant to someone in a low socioeconomic neighborhood, to the CEO of a top company. Someone who's a CEO of a company, earning lots of money. Because I've worked in some of the poorest areas in the UK. I spent 7 years in a place called Oldham. A lot of people on social security. And I thought these guys have the right to the same quality health information as you get out here in California, right? And that's when I was writing the book, I thought I want these suggestions that I make to work for everyone. I want to bring people together. Mm-hmm. I want to bring the low carb people with the low fat people. I want to bring them together and go, look, what's the commonality here? What can we all focus on? And that's something I feel very passionate about. And most of the recommendations I make, in fact, there's 20 recommendations. Not that everyone has to do them all. I say you absolutely don't have to do them all. If you don't like one of them, don't do them. I'm really trying to allow people to personalize it. But 19 out of the 20 are completely free, right? You can't make an argument that they cost money. Mm-hmm. The one that you can make an argument for is when I say unprocess your diets. Right. You can argue that depending on where you live, depending on your income level, you may struggle to eat an unprocessed diet potentially in certain parts of the country without a bit of money. Okay?
But you did also in the book sort of provide a roadmap for how to do that cost effectively.
I do.
Yeah. And I think one of the observations, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this subject of, our respective silos, especially in the diet world and what you see on social media and the bickering and the conflicting science. And, I'm always thinking like, well, what is the best way to navigate this and communicate to the audience in a way that will be the most positively impactful. And I spend a lot of time thinking about how to bring people together, like yourself. And it's tricky, when people get very entrenched in their ideologies. And, somebody who's part of the plant-based camp, I see it on all sides, and everybody's guilty of it at various times. And it's not helping anyone. What it's doing is paralyzing the average well-intentioned consumer who's just trying to get actionable advice to improve their lives maybe 10%.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, you say we're all guilty of this from time to time. And I think as I get a bit older, a bit more experienced, I think actually, you know what? Why does one group have to be right? Why can't many different groups be right for different people? And, we often don't think about the context of someone's life or their cultural beliefs or how they've grown up. And I always, as a practicing physician, I just bring it back to my consultation room. I think, okay, what have I seen? What do I keep seeing? And I've seen, the reality is, if we talk about diet, for example, which again, I think we overly focus on it. And what I mean by that is, I think food is very, very important, but food is much more than fat versus carbs, right? But good health is much more than just food. And my own personal bias is that when I change my diet, right, my health starts to improve, right? But that's my personal bias, because I've had many patients who that wasn't the route they wanted to take. Some of them, like I've got so many patients who've got mental health problems, they didn't want to change their diet, even though I knew that would help improve the way they felt about themselves and their well-being. They started getting more physically active first, and then that made them feel better. So then they wanted to change their diets, and that has almost been pivotal in this 4-pillar approach, which is, okay, guys, you choose where you want to start. I don't mind if you want to start with food, right? Start there. But if you don't want to start there, that's okay as well. And, I want to make this, this book came out a few months ago in the UK, right? And it's doing incredibly well. And I think the reason it is doing so well is because I've really tried hard to not talk down to people, not to tell people what to do. Nobody wants to be told what to do, right? And I don't do that. And it surprises people. But as a doctor, I have never still, in nearly 20 years of practice, I've still never told a patient of mine that they have to give up smoking. And what I mean by that is I feel that my job as a doctor is to have an honest conversation with them if they come into my consultation room. And if they ask me, my job is to tell them what that is doing for their health and their well-being. If at the end of that conversation, the man or the woman says to me, hey, doc, I get it. I hear what you're saying. But you know what? I get so much enjoyment out of that. And
I'm not going to quit.
I feel as a human being, I feel, what right do I have to say to him? No, you must give it up. And actually, I think one of the reasons why I tend to get really good compliance with my patients is because I do treat them like partners. I treat them like adults. Even if that smoking conversation is just setting the scene for 6 months down the line or 12 months down the line, when they've thought about it and reflected and we've done a bit of other work and they come back and go, hey, you know what, I might be ready for it now. So I think, I think that side of things is really, really important.
Yeah, finding the psychological button that's going to activate the person. And everybody has something different. There's a different way in with every individual. So you almost have to really take like an inventory of someone when they come into your office to try to determine what is the thing that I can talk about with this person that's going to catalyze change in them. Yeah.
And do you know what? The hardest thing for me, Rich, was I know how to do that one-on-one with the patient, or right. I'd like to think I do. I think the biggest skill of a healthcare professional is actually how do you interact and communicate with your patient. I think that is the number one thing that actually leads to good outcomes. I don't care how many papers and how many science things you've read. If you don't know how to make it personal and relatable to that person in front of you, it doesn't matter. Really doesn't matter.
But the system is not set up to encourage that. And that's one thing I want to explore with you. And I want to get into the 4 pillars and all of that. But I think maybe it would be good to kind of contextualize all of this by establishing the lay of the land right now in terms of what is going on with chronic lifestyle disease in North America and the developed world. Because the statistics and this, specifically some of the numbers that you use in your book, They're just appalling.
They're beyond appalling. They're unsustainable for every single healthcare system on a financial level, but on a human level, on a moral level. Chronic disease is affecting so many families, and it's causing pain, disability, heartache, premature death. I've gone on record before as saying 80% of what I see as a medical doctor in my practice is in some way related to our collective modern lifestyles. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm not putting blame on people, right? Because I get it. It can be tricky. Okay, but I'm saying collectively, the way we're living our lifestyles is having a negative impact on the way that we feel. And look, in the book, there's some US statistics, but I'll give you a UK statistic that is frankly alarming, right? And this is from 2012. Okay, that in 2012, so 6 years ago, one report suggested that the UK was paying £20 billion. So that is about 28 billion
dollars.
Sorry, $1 million on the direct and indirect costs of type 2 diabetes.
It's insane.
And type 2 diabetes is a fully preventable, in most cases, it is a preventable condition. It is a lifestyle, environmental driven condition. And we're saying we're going to effectively, if we don't do anything different, we're going to allow it to bankrupt our healthcare systems. I find it incredibly sad.
Yeah. I'm looking at your book right now. 1 in 10 Americans currently has type 2 diabetes. Between 1990 and 2013, rates of this disease shot up by an incredible 71% in the U.S., one of the most dramatic increases of any nation. It costs us $245 billion a year. Half of all American adults currently suffer from a chronic disease, with 1 in 4 people suffering from 2 or more. Chronic disease is by a wide margin now the deadliest problem facing America. It's true. It's unbelievable.
This is for America. This is not just a health problem. This is an economic problem. I think the US are going to struggle to be a well-functioning economy, a global power, whatever you want to call it, with this rate of chronic disease, because people don't often think about is this chronic disease is affecting their whole bodies. It's affecting the way that their brain operates. It's affecting their ability to be productive in the workplace, productive and happy, and interact with their families, with their work colleagues. And that's the other thing, I see a lot of the disharmony I see in relationships and families. Often it comes down to, not the only thing, but often a key part of that is that people don't feel good in themselves. They're functioning day to day suboptimally. Mm-hmm. They're not functioning at peak performance. So they are, they're having little rows and little problems with their partners, with their kids, with their work colleagues. And often that's because they're putting junk in their mouth, right? Which is affecting their brain and their mood. They're sort of only having 5 hours sleep a night, which is, trashing their brain in the morning when, in terms of, yourself, or certainly I know as a father, if I haven't slept well, my ability to deal with the stresses at home and, let things just lie, or when the kids are doing something, is much reduced when I haven't slept well.
It's not even close.
Yeah. So a lot of these things are happening because we're not looking after our health. I think when we say chronic disease, I think it's always worth explaining that we're talking about things like, yes, type 2 diabetes, yes, high blood pressure, yes, heart disease and stroke, yes, Alzheimer's disease, but we're also talking about things like mental health problems. Mm-hmm. The latest statistic in the UK, right, which comes from the Mind charity, is that 1 in 4 people in the UK are going to have a mental health problem in any given year. I just find it an incredible statistic. And we're still looking for this pharmaceutical model of care to try and fix these problems. And I could tell you, it's just simply, in a lot of cases, it is not working. And herein is the crux of the matter. 40, 50 years ago, what we were seeing as medical doctors responded very well to the magic bullet. You come in, mm-hmm. right? Let's say you've got a chest infection or a pneumonia, right? You've got the overgrowth of the bug that's causing you this problem. Come and see the doctor. They identify and give you a pill to zap that bug. And then in a week or maybe 10 days, you're better, right? We can talk about the knock-on consequences mm-hmm. of that, but that's a separate story. But that worked 40, 50 years ago. The bulk of what we see now does not respond to this, one pill for every ill model. There's multiple things that are going on. And it's not just one suggestion you've got to make. You've got to tackle multiple things in one's lifestyle if you're going to get a result. And those 4 pillars could have been 5, 6, 7, right? I could have expanded it out. But
right. Frank's got 6.
Frank's got 6. Yeah. But there's
you guys can battle it out. Is it 4 or 6?
Yeah, exactly. And the reality is that the clash always is how can you communicate complex health information simplistically? Not in a patronizing fashion, but in a way that actually people feel, okay, I get it, I can do that. And I nearly went to 5, but I thought, no, I'm just going to stick to 4. So I think connection and community.
Yeah, that was one of Frank's, I think. And I actually wondered that, especially since, you talk about the sort of the blue zones and the diet part, and that's such a key component of longevity from those studies.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, the connection piece, I put in the relax pillar. So one of my recommendations is, to eat round, reclaim your dining table, right? And it's to sit round at least once a day if possible, to have a meal with someone else if you can. And I bring in that chapter why community is so important. And that really is what I hang it off in the book, because you're right, I could have made a 5th pillar all about it, but I also think there's something in keeping it simple, simple enough that people think, yeah, I get it. I can do that today. I don't need to wait till January next year to start this big program. This feels pretty achievable. And I can tell you, Rich, where did that reclaim your dining table come from? Because people might go, yeah, well, how's that going to help with my health? Why is that important? Right. I made some TV documentaries for BBC Television where I went and lived with and alongside families to help them with their health problems. And I was very fortunate. I feel very humbled to have had that experience, to be invited into people's homes and actually see in real life what they do, not what they tell me in the consultation room, but what they actually do in real life. And so many of the families I stayed with didn't sit and eat together. Forget about what they're eating for a minute. One of the kids is maybe on the sofa scrolling their Facebook whilst they're eating. Mum might be watching television, but also doing her emails while she's eating. Dad's in another room, the son's somewhere else. And I saw that and I thought, what was the norm? I'm sure it was the norm in the US, just as in the UK, maybe 40 years ago, that every dining table, every house would have a dining table. Now we're knocking them out. We're making room for big widescreen televisions and all this sort of stuff. And I made the recommendation to so many of those families, hey guys, look, we aren't going to change what you eat, but I wonder if you guys could manage once a day where you sit together and eat as a family. And I saw the profound benefits. Yes, they were eating less because they were eating more mindfully and they were connecting whilst they were eating. But there was this couple lovely middle-aged couple, and I came back after a few days and I said, how are you guys doing with that? And the husband said to me, he said, it's incredible. I feel like I'm really connecting with my wife. We never used to sit around and without devices and have our meal, but I'm asking her about her day. I'm learning things that happened. His wife said the same thing, and they feel closer. There's more intimacy there just from making that suggestion. And I didn't learn that in my consultation room. Had I not gone and stayed with those families, I wouldn't have seen that something that I thought was relatively normal is frankly not normal anymore.
Right. Yeah, it's becoming, it's gone the way of the dodo. It's sort of thought of as antiquarian and quaint and, at this point. But there's so much truth in what you just said. But I think the first hurdle is really getting people to understand on a very basic, elementary, fundamental level that they have control over their health, that the decisions that they make about how they're living their life hour to hour, day to day, have profound implications in terms of whether they're going to succumb to disease or live vibrantly. And I think for a lot of people, that's revelatory and new.
That's brand new. Even the way I was taught at medical school really didn't empower us, didn't empower me as a medical doctor with that information, because back then we thought our genes were our destiny. right? That's kind of what we thought was going to happen. And then as we do the Human Genome Project, we get more and more. We understand that it's all to do with our genes. What cards have we been dealt when we come out of the womb? But the last 10 years has changed all of that, and again, the statistics vary depending on who you read, but, there seems to be a bit of consensus now that about 10% of our health outcomes for most of us is down to our genes. 90% of it is down to our environment and our lifestyle, and that's incredibly empowering. So I think there is a generation out there who think and have been trained to believe that it's, oh, my father had type 2 diabetes, of course I'm going to have type 2 diabetes. There's nothing I can do, And in some way that plays into the whole emotional piece, which is, you know what, I'm going to keep making these choices because it doesn't matter,
Doesn't matter.
Dad got it, I'm going to get it, so I might as well enjoy my life, right? Or that's the perception. And that's the key message I try whenever I speak, whenever I teach doctors, whenever I talk to the public. I'm always trying to say, guys, we've got the control. We've got more control than we think. Just to be clear, there are some genetic conditions that are related to, like even Alzheimer's, for example. There is under 1% of Alzheimer's is due to your genes, right? Some people are born with something that means it's very likely they're going to get it, okay? But that is not the vast majority of us. And I think even that message is like a revelation for people. And even if I could, help the incredible, people like yourself and other doctors and other people who are trying to spread this message around the world, if all we do is get that message out there, that's a great starting point. Because here's the other thing, right? Is that one of the things that frustrates me about the infighting on social media and on the internet about a lot of these things is that many people are kind of saying similar things, right? So to give you one extreme viewpoint here, I wouldn't call it an extreme viewpoint, but just to sort of paint the picture, obviously there is a lot of animosity between certain groups, whether it's vegan, plant-based versus low carb and, animal products, for an example. But both groups, right, are saying now that actually we can reverse a lot of these chronic diseases. Both groups will say we can reverse type 2 diabetes. We can reduce our chances of getting Alzheimer's by adopting our dietary pattern, right? So I trying to sift through that and sit just outside it and look at it and go, okay, so compared to 10 years ago when very few people were saying that we could reverse a condition like type 2 diabetes.
That was crazy making.
Yeah. And now we've got this coming out from people who may have a different viewpoint on how the best way to do that is, right? But they're all saying we can reverse this stuff. That I think is a revelation. I think we need to focus on that. Go, okay, great. So I don't necessarily need to be on medication for the rest of my life. I might be able to do something about this. And I find that exciting. And I think that's the message we need to get to people and then help them make small changes. So why do people find it so hard? So many reasons for that. There's a lot of emotional reasons behind that as well. But I think if we can make it seem accessible to them, if they feel, hey, you know what, I can do that. Like one of my recommendations is 15 minutes of me time a day. Most people, 15 minutes, and it's incredible because it's like a domino effect. You start it off simple. You get people go, right, I can do that. I think I can manage 15 minutes, right? And then that domino falls. You start to feel the benefits. And then the other dominoes start to come in line.
But Dr. Chatterjee, you don't understand my life. I get up at 4:30 in the morning. I got 4 kids. I got to get them dressed into school. And then I work 2 jobs. And by the time I get home at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and I got to try to make a little bit of food for my kids, and I'm just exhausted.
I get it. I understand. So what do you think you can manage? Can we start with 5 minutes? Do you think you can find 5 minutes in your day? And that's the approach I take. These are just suggestions. These are not prescriptions. These are saying, look, I think 50 minutes is a great starting point. But if all you can manage is 5 minutes, right? And even that fictional lady who, you just spoke about, I bet you she can manage 5 minutes somewhere in her day. And that's not me being judgmental at all. I'm just saying I've got patients like that. And what I try and do one-on-one is find the way in, find what is it that they're doing. Where can I get a bit of traction here? What can I start them with? I've made a deal with a patient before that they're going to do 2 minutes meditation a day. Right? So I can't do it. They said, I can't meditate. I can't, I'm not going to have time. It doesn't fit with my lifestyle. I said, okay, you brush your teeth for 2 minutes in the morning. Okay. Why do you do 2 minutes in the morning? Because I've always done that. I said, yeah, you've ingrained that in a habit. Even if you're busy, you never don't brush your teeth for 2 minutes in the morning, 2 minutes in the evening. Okay. He goes, yeah, that's right. I don't. I said, well, how about then, do you think you can manage 2 minutes of meditation? Yeah, 2 minutes. Sure. And we made a deal. I said, okay, I'll tell you what, let's make a commitment now that you're going to do that. She goes away. She starts doing that. Within about 2 or 3 months, she's doing 20 minutes a day. Mm-hmm. So I very much, this comes from real life experience, Rich. This is, I when I look back on my career, and I think early on in my career, I really had a real disconnect with, I went to, very prestigious medical school. I qualified as a specialist and I moved to general practice because I was always searching for something in medicine that resonated with me. When I was working in kidney medicine, I thought, I don't want to spend my whole career just looking at kidneys. Everything, I always intuitively knew that everything was connected. And I felt that we were getting too super specialized in medicine. So I moved, much to my dad's.
You come from a line of doctors.
I come from a line of doctors. He's an Indian doctor who came over to the UK. They value the specialist. His son,
GP.
His son had qualified as a specialist. Had done all the hard work to get there. I said, Dad, I think I'm going to change. I'm going to become a generalist. He's like, why do you want to do that? And I've always now that I get it, now that I understand what I love doing with patients, I can look back now and go, that's why I was slightly frustrated. I didn't get that deep enjoyment out of my job that I do today. Mm-hmm. Because I just thought I was giving pills out left, right, center.
Well, you're a people guy too, right? Like I can tell that you're somebody who enjoys basically like figuring out what makes other people tick. And that's such a huge part of practicing medicine that I think we lost touch with, that is now slowly starting to come back. We're seeing this, influx, this rise of functional integrative medicine doctors like yourself. It's becoming a thing. And yet it's still very much a small sliver in comparison to the way most people are practicing medicine and the way that most patients experience their healthcare practitioners.
And it's very sad. Mm-hmm. It's very sad because this is affecting people's lives. It's people are dying early. Their day-to-day lives are being hindered because, we're not evolving with the times. The health landscape of the developed world, and actually the developing world as well, has changed. Mm-hmm. So the way we practice medicine also has to change, but it hasn't. And therein lies one of the big problems. And, I say, I've created, I was getting so frustrated with this. I thought, okay, I can keep talking about it. I can keep going on BBC television and talking about this being a problem, but how are we going to start fixing this? So with a colleague of mine, I created a brand new course called Prescribing Lifestyle Medicine. That was the first prescribing lifestyle medicine course to be accredited by the Royal College of GPs. So
that's great.
Yeah, and we taught 200 docs in the UK back in January. We ran it again in April. And why that accreditation was important, because it gave it a bit of validity. It gave it to other docs who were like, I'm reading all this stuff on the internet. I'm interested, but having the CPD points there for people to come.
Right, legitimizes it.
It legitimized it. And, it took, we spent 6 months working up this course. We're trying to do it in one day. But it's my way of trying to say, look, yes, I've showcased on television that type 2 diabetes, fibromyalgia, can be reversed in many cases. Panic anxiety attacks can come down by 70% by making lifestyle changes.
Right. Autoimmune diseases, all this, Crohn's, all sorts of things.
I feel like, I've helped showcase that to a mainstream audience on BBC One and in countries all over the world, that these conditions can often be reversed, but certainly dramatically improved, right? By making these changes to these 4 key areas. And I thought, well, that's great. But if the public are watching that, then they go to their own doctor for help in that, but the doctor doesn't know what to do with that, that's where we got a problem. So I thought, as a medical doctor, maybe I can be part of the solution by helping to educate a new generation of doctors in what is possible. And we end the course with me and my colleague, we do a role play, right? And people love the role play, because what we do is we on stage, we sort of go through how a consultation might roll when someone comes in with type 2 diabetes. And the first one is what typically happens, which is, someone knocks on the door. I'm the doc. I'm looking at my computer. I'm typing away. The guy comes in. I barely make eye contact. Mm-hmm. I say, hey, Barry, look, we've got some news for you, Barry. Pretty worrying blood results have come through. You've been diagnosed with a condition called type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes, it puts you at increased risk of heart disease, stroke, Alzheimer's. You may start getting nerve damage. We may, some people need to amputate their legs. But don't worry, we've got a great medication for that. So we're going to start you on that today. We're going to start you on something called metformin today. Normally within 6 months, 12 months, we'll put you on a second pill. Sometimes we'll need to progress to insulin injections. But don't worry, we'll be keeping a regular eye on you. And as Barry's walking out in shell-shocked, hey, and if you can lose a bit of weight as well and go to the gym, that would be great. Mm-hmm. Okay.
If that is even said.
If that is even said. But if it is said like that, what does the patient walk out with? They walk out with, okay, I've got this condition. It's serious. Okay. But the doc said there's loads of drugs he can give me. Yeah, he only mentioned lifestyle. That's not really that important, because he spent the whole time talking about drugs. So I say to people, if we prioritize lifestyle, the patient will prioritize lifestyle. If we prioritize drugs, they'll prioritize drugs. And so you compare that with Barry coming in and me saying, hey, Barry, look, those blood tests you've recently done. Actually, a few things have shown up in there. And you have a conversation. You say, Barry, look, your blood sugar's a little bit high. And you're actually in the range now, what we would call type 2 diabetes. Do you know what that is? I don't know. Well, you explain what it is. You say, hey, Barry, look, here's the thing. You will have been doing things in your lifestyle, possibly without realizing it, for a good 10 years now, that has led you up this continuum so that you now actually have a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes. Would you like me to help you understand what those things are, how we can change them? And then hopefully, if we're lucky, we can start turning this thing around. Yeah, hey, Dr. Strategy, I'd love to. Yeah, let's talk. Again, I don't want to labor the point, but the whole dynamic is different. Barry goes out of that consultation with some actionable steps thinking, hey, there's something I can do about this.
Right, empowered.
Yeah, but that comes to our skill as a clinician and also our willingness to prioritize that.
But in fairness, there also has to be systemic changes to the way the entire system is set up. I mean, look, doctors are well-intentioned. They want to help people. They want to be healers. That's why they get into it. But when the system is constructed such that they have 5 or 10 minutes with each person, it's set up to fail in that way. So, I love the fact that you created this program, but it needs to be across the board in the medical schools. From the very beginning, doctors need to be trained in all of this stuff. And systemic changes have to be made that allow for that kind of bandwidth with each patient so that person can leave with that sense of empowerment.
Rich, you're absolutely right. And, ultimately, this is not just going to be the doctor. This is arguably, we need to collaborate more with nutrition professionals, with health coaches, But what I say to people is, people say to me sometimes, why do doctors need this training? Why can't doctors just refer to the right people? And there's a fundamental misunderstanding of what our job is, you see, because if we don't know, right? Okay, we spoke about type 2 diabetes and let's say obesity, right? These are things which are obviously, for many people, related to our lifestyle. Okay, so arguably we might refer here. Okay, what about conditions like mental health problems, right? What about something like migraines, which cause huge disability, huge morbidity across the population? What about these problems where we don't automatically think that lifestyle has a role? When I know full well, and I've seen that you can absolutely make a huge impact with these patients with lifestyle changes, unless we get the training we're never, ever going to be even referring these guys to health coaches or lifestyle professionals to help them.
Yeah, you wouldn't even know to do.
You wouldn't even know to do that. You know, I gave a lecture. It was in Bristol in the UK in January, where for the Royal College of GPs on well-being for doctors, because burnout in physicians is a huge problem. And I said to these guys at the start, I said, how many of you, with a patient who comes in with a mental health problem like depression, how many of you talk about food with those patients? And, you know, about 5% of the room put their hand up. Then I presented some of the science behind it, including, you know, there's this beautiful trial from February 2017 called the SMILES trial in Australia, very small, okay, but it was a randomized controlled trial showing that people who followed a modified Mediterranean diet, these are all patients with depression, moderate or severe depression. They were already on therapy. None of that was changed. But one group went on a modified Mediterranean diet for 12 weeks. The other group had some sort of talking, social therapy. And at the end of 12 weeks, there was a statistically significant remission rate in the group who went on a modified Mediterranean diet. Mm-hmm. Now, there was only 67 participants, but that adds to the weight of evidence that is already building. And I said, guys, look, how many of you now are going to have this conversation with your mental health patients? And pretty much everyone put their hand up. Because you know, something that seems so obvious to me is not mainstream knowledge amongst these professionals. So yes, the training needs to help. You know, this training needs to be compulsory in medical schools. I absolutely agree. And some people said when we put on this course, they, you know, because everyone's, you know, a social media expert these days is like, you know, this is not enough. You know, you need to get this in medical schools. I agree with all that. But you've got to start somewhere.
You've got to start somewhere.
You've got to give this movement credibility.
The mental health piece is so huge. And I think, you know, I'm interested in your experience. Like when you start talking about treating mental illness or things like depression through lifestyle alterations, people get nervous.
Yeah.
Right? Because we're just used to thinking of it a little bit differently than we think about physical health. But it is so debilitating for so many people, and it kind of lurks in the shadows. And you know, my experience is in working with lots of people and being part of the recovery community for many years is that even when you're amongst people who are very high functioning, who seem like they have everything together, if you can get them in a safe environment where they have an inkling, a slight willingness to be vulnerable, and you just poke them ever so slightly, you'd be amazed at what comes out. We're all dealing on some level with all kinds of stressors and anxieties that are really indicia of our times. Like how we live our lives now is so antithetical to the natural rhythms of, you know, how we evolved.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And you know, there's this theory about sickness behavior, which is, you know, if we think about the body and our stress response system, okay, and let's say in Paleolithic times that we had come down with an infection, okay? So when our immune system goes on high alert, so it produces all kinds of inflammatory markers to help us fight that infection. But what it also does is make us tired. It makes us sleepy. It makes us withdraw. We don't take pleasure from things. And it almost sends us back to the back of the cave in the dark so we can just rest and recuperate, you know, whilst the body is attacking what it needs to attack. And a lot of people are speculating that actually is very similar to what's going on with mental health problems. It's potentially an appropriate or an inappropriate response. Well, it's something that was an appropriate response in a different environment. But as the environment has changed, our 21st century living, that response is actually doing us harm now. Mm-hmm. But it served us very well in the past. And I kind of like that because it really helps me understand why does our body have all these mechanisms at play? Why things suddenly start to go wrong with all these different systems in our body? And what's changed is the environment. But the other great point you bring up, Rich, is that, you know, lifestyle, you know, what's that got to do with mental health? You know, and what I would say to that is, and I've got to be very careful to caveat this, is that any chronic disease, even type 2 diabetes, but let's talk about mental health, there are multiple factors that play a role. It ain't just one thing. So yeah, you may have huge emotional trauma that needs dealing with, right? But it doesn't mean you can't also get an improvement from optimizing your lifestyle. And it's not necessarily one or the other. We're always looking for, what is it? Is it emotional or is it physical? Well, maybe it's a combination. And I talk a lot in my book and in my sort of work that I do. I talk about thresholds, right? We've all got an individual threshold. So the way I try and explain it is if we're born in perfect health, let's say, we start down here in perfect health, we can deal with multiple insults up to a point. So let's say, we had a ton of antibiotics as a baby. Okay. We didn't enjoy our school. We got bullied at school. We eat a poor diet. We don't work out. We work too hard. We get very, very close to our threshold. And then something happens, you have a bereavement in the family, or your girlfriend breaks up with you, and that tips you over your threshold. That's when you get sick. And we think, it was the last thing that we need to fix. No, it's once you cross your threshold, you need to start again. It's like in life, you've got 1 ball, 2 balls you're juggling, 3, 4, right? You could just about keep everything going. Then someone throws a 5th ball in, everything falls down. And so my approach is about making multiple changes. And so, on the last series of Doctor in the House, there was a lady, right, who had a significantly traumatic emotional event when she was 19, right? Ended up in intensive care, in a coma. She woke up. She was scared out of her mind. Since then, she had really bad panic and anxiety attacks, okay, which is crippling her life. And she applied to be on the show because she was desperate. She had tried counseling. She tried antidepressants. Nothing was working. And again, I didn't know if I was going to be able to help her or not. But I thought, okay, what's going on here? Her diet was appalling. She was compensating with the way she felt with junk food and processed food. She was up late on her screens, all this kind of stuff, right? And again, she was very skeptical when I suggested that we would start by changing her diet. There was a huge resistance. Well, you're saying I've done this to myself with the food I'm eating. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that something significant happened when you were 19. But you have, because of the way you felt, you put loads and loads of layers onto that as well, and lots of compensatory behaviors around that. Let's just start. You've tried counseling, you've tried antidepressants, okay? Let's take a different approach. So we started with her diet, and it was just incredible. At the end of 6 weeks, her symptoms had gone down by 70%. Not a miraculous reversal, but her quality of life had improved immeasurably. And I feel, and towards the end, we then got her to a talking therapist, but she was in a much better state that she could now access that and deal with that. And, we've got to, I'm sorry to labor the point, but you've got to do multiple things in multiple areas. And that's why this is not a book about food. This is why it's a book about, there are many great books on food. I'm not against that, right? But I think, that stuff is out there, right? What can I contribute? I want to show people that the quality of your sleep is as important as the food that you put in your mouth. And I didn't know that 5 years ago. And you may be skeptical of that potentially. But, when you look at the research of what sleep deprivation does to us, I've helped patients reverse or certainly put their type 2 diabetes into remission.
Yeah, there's something in the book about insulin resistant, the impact of poor sleep on insulin resistance, which I did not know how significant that was. It's crazy.
It's huge. And there was a study recently done where they sleep deprived a healthy group of people down to 4 to 5 hours a night, which is not dissimilar to what a lot of the population
a lot of people will swear that they're fine with that.
A lot of people will swear they're okay with that. But here's the thing. A lot of the time, so there's two points there. When you say people say they're okay with that, if we go back to my threshold analogy, okay, they may find that sleep deprivation, and they may not have any symptoms yet. They may be getting away with it, right? But they may be moving up towards their threshold. So that sleep deprivation may be okay day to day. They may perceive it as being okay. But then when the stress goes up at work, when something happens that they're not expecting, when they lose their job or their mother gets sick, suddenly they're that much closer and they tip over. And that's why I think, we exist on a continuum of health. When you get diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, that started 10 years ago.
Right, of course.
When you get diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, that started 30 years ago, right? So we need, as a system, we need to better help people identify when they're moving up that curve. When they're not at diagnosis stage, but they're moving up that curve. But the thing with sleep deprivation, and I've got patients who come to see me they have changed their diet. They've read the blogs, right? Whether it's plant-based, whether it's another approach, they've read all that and they've changed their diet. And I come in and I see them and their blood sugars still aren't coming down. And I think your diet's pretty good, and then some of them are super stressed and they're not sleeping. And there was one particular case, a 52-year-old guy, busy, high performer, executive. His diet was fantastic, but he was getting so frustrated that he couldn't get his sugar down anymore. Mm-hmm. And when I started to say, look, we need to think about switching off your computer 1 hour before beds. We need to do 5 minutes of meditation a day, right? Just to get you started. 6 months later, his blood sugar starts coming down, because it's not always diet. And that really is I'm not trying to say diet's not important. It is clearly very, very important.
It's just not all diet.
It ain't all diet.
And I think that's what when you get into these silos and these arguments, the sort of implicit message is it is all diet, right? And yeah, diet's huge. It's super important. But beyond that, there's so many things. You could be the most perfect raw vegan, fruitarian, whatever. But if you're bananas and you argue with people all day long and you're an asshole and you don't sleep at night and you're staring at your phone all day long, like you're not a healthy person.
Yeah, you're not. And if we go back to sleep for a second, that study where they deprive people of 4 to 5 hours a night for I think 6 nights, okay, they had a 40% reduction in their capability to manage their blood sugar. At the end of that, some of them would have been diagnosed as pre-diabetic, right? Just from sleep deprivation.
Wow.
And I think we've got to start bringing this into the equation because you mentioned the blue zones. I talk about the blue zones and I find them fascinating because we can learn so much from them. But when, I know you've had Dan on the show before and, I had the privilege of meeting Michel Poulain, who's the Belgian researcher who I think along with Dan helped to sort of coin the term and do all that work. I met him in Guernsey last year, which is an incredible experience, which I'll tell you about actually. But when we look at them and we try and look at the perfect diet, I understand the rationale behind that, but we're looking at populations who are eating well. They're also pretty they're physically active every day. They're sleeping well. They've got low levels of stress and they've got a strong sense of community, right? So when we look at them, it's a lifestyle. It's the whole piece put together. And when we compare in the West, where we are underslept, we're overly stressed, we're physically inactive, and a lot of us are eating highly processed junk food, right? That's just a recipe for trouble. And we can't, I don't think, just take one aspect of the blue zones. We have to look at it all and go, let's try and optimize as many of these as we can. And the other thing I sort of would love to sort of try and get across is, I get it. Life is tricky for some people. You may work shifts, right? You may find it hard, right? So maybe if your sleep pillar ain't going very well, maybe you need to optimize the food pillar and the movement pillar and the relaxation pillar. You can you can lower your threshold in many different ways. And I think the blue zones are a prime example of people lowering their thresholds, and keeping themselves very resilient. Because that's the thing, keeping yourself away from that threshold doesn't just mean you're going to feel better. You've got more resilience. So when life does chuck you, it's curveballs. And that will happen. Nothing stays static. Everything's always changing. You're more resilient to fight it.
Yeah. And I think, it's only getting crazier. I mean, with these, devices in our pockets, it's becoming harder and harder to detach, to disconnect. And, what's going to happen 10, 20 years from now? It's going to be almost impossible to unplug at all. And the pace of life just continues to get rapider and rapider. And, there's no, like, you actually have to work to be bored now. There's no reason to ever be bored again. You can be overstimulated during every minute of every waking hour.
We've lost the art of stillness. We've lost that ability to just sit there and let our mind wander. And actually, that's when a lot of the creativity happens. Your default mode network, your DMN in your brain, which is where a lot of these creative ideas come from, that goes into overdrive when we're not focusing on a task, when we're just sitting there, just watching the world go by, or maybe when you're going for a run. I'm going to bet that you get a lot of your great ideas when you're out running.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Rather than when you're
It's the only time where I can just be by myself and my thoughts in nature.
Yeah, because you're not trying to sit here figuring it out. I've got this problem. I can't get to the bottom of this. You probably go out for a run and you find, I've got the solution.
Right. Or when I am grinding it out and trying to figure it out, I'm like, oh, let's see what's happening on Twitter. I'm going to stare at my phone now.
Hey, man, I know that feeling. But I'd say I recently gave a talk to Apple in London on well-being for their employees. And, incredibly, privileged, and I feel very humble to go in there and talk to them. And I actually spoke to them about tech. And I said, I felt like I was in the lion's den talking about tech and some of the problems, but also what a great opportunity they've got, because so many people use their products. They can actually shape the world. And I think they do take some of these things quite responsibly. You can actually really shape what people do. But what was interesting, I spoke about my 4 pillars to them to try and improve their well-being. At the end of the talk, this chap came up to me. He must have been in his mid-20s, right? He said, hey, Dr. Strachey, I found that really, really interesting, but can I ask you something? I said, yeah, sure, fire away. It's like, if I switch my phone off an hour before bed, what am I going to do? Rich, he was serious, man.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding you. This is a kid.
Panic.
He was deadly serious. And I thought, I learned a lot, and I thought, wow. Actually, for some people, they're so embedded to this, they genuinely don't know what they're going to do without it. And I thought, I've got 2 young kids, now 8 and 5 years old. And I worry about this, as a father. Yeah. There's always something to worry about as a parent. And I think, what am I going to do? Very soon, everyone in my son's class is going to have a phone. And he's going to be like, Daddy, can I have one? He already asked it for his birthday recently. And, I looked at his thought, I'm not going there with Dad. I know what the answer is, but I worry because I don't want to make my children social outcasts. Yeah, I really struggle with knowing some of the problems.
Yeah, it's a legit concern. I mean, I'm older than you, but I didn't grow up with, I didn't start using a computer until I was in college, and that was still many years prior to the internet. So, myself and to some extent yourself, like, we're the last generation of people to know what it's like to be without all of these things. There will never be another generation of humans who lived through what it's like to not be on the internet. And so it is tricky, as a parent myself, to try to find that balance, because on some level we have to accept the fact that these devices are part of what it means to be fluent in the language of our times. So it's not about like, no, you can't have it. It's about creating responsible habits around it, which is difficult when you're talking about a device that has the addictive potency of heroin.
I mean, you've just hit the nail on the head. It's not about demonizing these devices and technology. This technology is fantastic, right? It's utterly life-changing.
We're having like what we're doing right now.
What we're doing right now, or we could have done this, let's say, over Skype, right? We could have been 5,000 miles away from each other having a conversation because of this technology, which is utterly incredible. And I think what we have to just remember is that this is a new technology, right? We haven't quite yet figured out as a human race, how do we use it in a way that it really helps us and serves us rather than enslaves us? And just as we've got like sleep hygiene rules, I think we need technology hygiene rules. We need, what are good practice rules? We need a bit of tech-free time every day. I absolutely believe we need a bit of tech-free time every day. But here's the thing, if you've got that device near you, it's very, very hard because they are addictive. Yeah. And one of the sort of recommendations I make is, can you have a screen-free Sabbath? Can you have one day a week without a screen completely? Now, I get it. People are going to almost be having palpitations at the thought of that.
What am I going to do?
Yeah. So I say, well, if you can't do a whole day, try an hour. Start there. I tell you, on a Sunday morning, right? If I go with my wife and my 2 kids to the local park, right? If I go and my phone's in my pocket, right? It goes something like this. Kids are playing, we're all interacting. Before you know it, I'm just hey, they're on the climbing frame. Just have a cheeky little look, what's going on Instagram, and then before where are the kids, or something like that. But
somebody abducted them.
Yeah, but before you know it, you're drawn into this world because it's powerful, it's engaging. If I make the decision, I'm leaving my phone at home, I have a completely different experience. I'm present. I'm mindful. I'm paying attention to what's going on. And my kids call me
You're
out.
not panicky and feeling naked?
Yeah, no, I love it, but I've got used to it. I've got used to it. And ultimately, my kids, particularly my daughter, she'll call me out. If I'm in the room with her somewhere and I'm distracted on my phone, she's like, Daddy, you're not listening to me, are you? I tell you, that's like a dagger in the heart for me. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm just going to put my phone off in another room. And so as a father, one thing I think is really important, it's something I really try and adhere to, is spend at least 1 hour a day with my kids when I'm around, without my phone anywhere in sight and not even on. Because that's my strategy. Again, I'm not saying everyone has to do this. I'm just saying I'm trying to figure it out. I'm as addicted to this technology as anyone else is. Yeah. I'm trying to figure out a way where I can still get the best of it without harming myself and also my relationship with my kids in the process.
Yeah. Well, when you figure it out, let me know. It's hard, right?
It's hard.
It's really hard. I mean, it's like, and I make my living through this, through this ecosystem. So it's even more difficult for me to create, because I can make a justification. Well, this is what, I need to be doing. I got to promote the latest podcast. I got to da-da-da-da. And, it's not good for me, And so I go through phases where I'm really good and then I lapse. And, as somebody who's a recovering alcoholic, it just pings every part of my brain that wants to use and check out and get that little rush.
But what's the difference? You say, you compare it to alcohol, but let's talk about food for a minute. People will often say, yeah, I could eat well for a short period of time, then I've fallen off the wagon. I couldn't do it. And it's the same thing with these phones. I'm not expecting perfection from people. No, it's not my right to expect perfection from anyone, but that's not what I'm trying to suggest in what I do with patients, what I do when I speak to the public or in the book. What I'm trying to do is empower people with information. Say, look, guys, this is what's going on, right? This is going to be having an impact on you. Here are some strategies that you might want to adopt. Why don't you suck it and see? Why don't you try this? You like this one? You don't like this one? Fine. You've tried it. That doesn't work for you. Try this one. I mean, one thing I will say is one of the most life-changing things people can do, okay, is take off notifications, right? And I'm deadly serious. You don't need, that's the way you can start taking control of that technology and go, I don't need to be notified every single time someone likes my Instagram post or my latest Facebook article or someone's just retweeted me. I don't need to be notified every time. So all my notifications are off. My email inbox is on manual refresh. So I can look at my phone. I could have 20 emails waiting for me. I don't know. I have to go into the app and I have to, refresh the screen.
Right.
And then I see. And, that's a small step that I think most people can manage. And I would say to people listening to this who are tempted to do something, I'd say start there. Yeah. Just start there.
That's one thing I have done. And that was life-changing. All the notifications on my phone are off. The one thing where it gets me into trouble, though, is when you take notifications off your text messages, because there's an expectation when someone texts you that it prompts an immediate responce.
But where does that expectation come from?
Well, I don't know. Maybe it's self-generated in my own mind. But I've trained now. I basically, unless it's really pertinent, I don't respond to text messages right away, so that people who text me don't then develop that expectation. But I don't know if you've noticed this, texting has now become like email. It's almost like I used to just not get that many texts, but now I get so many texts that it's like the same thing. But then I don't think to check my texts because I don't have that little number on there. I don't know when I have new ones.
Yeah, it's,
you can also grayscale your phone too, which I think is a great thing.
What's that? I'm not familiar with that.
There's a setting where you can go in and remove all the color. And so It's just black and white screen. And there's something about the way that everything is colored in a specific way. There's a lot of money and science that's gone into, creating that compulsive, addictive response. And color has a big role in that. So there's been studies done that when you grayscale your phone, that it really tempers that compulsivity.
Yeah.
There's a guy called Tristan Harris who's doing a lot of research in this right now. He's been kind of doing the podcast rounds, and it's super fascinating.
That's super interesting.
Yeah.
You know, communication is changing, isn't it? You're saying like text messages are becoming a bit more like emails, and it's very hard now to put those boundaries in now. You know, I try my best to guard my number, my phone number with my life, you know, because that then means people have got access to me on a Sunday, on a Saturday, you know, when I'm on family time. And those boundaries have just got blurred now. And, you know, it's funny, you know, I also think that we've lost an element of respect on other people's time and their boundaries, not because we're meaning to, but I'll give you an example. Recently, somebody who's got my number added me to a WhatsApp group of like 15 people. 14 of which don't have my number. And when it first happened, I was, you know, I was like, oh man, I'm on this WhatsApp group now. And these 14 people who don't have my number have now got my number, so they can contact me personally in a way that they couldn't do before. And again, it's nothing about ego or anything like that. It's just more, I'm really trying to guard my own personal time, my private space, and I feel that's been taken away from me now. And the person who did it didn't do that with any malice at all. They were
we haven't really written the etiquette rules.
Exactly. And that's what I think is going to be written over the next few years. And now is what is the right etiquette? Like, as you say, there's an expectation of the text message you should be responding. So you're helping to educate your community, your friends, people who have access to you via your text. You're helping to just educate them a little bit, go, hey, you know, when you text me, I'll get back to you, but it won't be quick. And I think we all have to do that. You know, Tim Ferriss wrote in the 4-Hour Work Week, you know, about, that's when I learned about the emails, about pre-setting the expectation when someone says to you, you know, this email gets checked twice a week or once a day. You know, I did that for a while, then I took it off. And, you know, I'm always experimenting, but it's about changing the expectation, right?
Yeah. He was here and he showed me his phone, and it said that he had like 8,000 unread emails or something like that. And I was like, do you read them and then mark them unread? He's like, no, I've never looked at them. And I did an experiment when I was as I told you before the podcast, just got back from Italy. I did an experiment where I had a colleague of mine, my assistant, handle all my emails while I was gone. I'd never like turned over my entire email box to somebody else and gone away for like 2 weeks and not looked at it. And that was definitely a learning experience. It was great, but it was like for a minute there, I felt very weird, you know,
almost like naked without that's your thing. And I think the key, as you say, is that we don't know the rules yet. We're all trying to figure this out.
Yeah, well, we're in the infancy of the most powerful technology that we've ever created. Yeah, and we're trying to find our way, and we're stumbling without the tools yet.
Yeah, I mean, this is such a huge impact on us. I don't think we even realize, you know, how big this is. In fact, I'd go as far as saying that this, arguably, our stress component in our lives and the way we use our technology, for many of my patients, is arguably more important than the food that they're putting in their mouth, right? It is to be on the entire time, to wake up and go first thing on that phone, and the noise that comes in from that constantly throughout the day, and often it's still going on when we're in bed at night, lying there, still checking everything. No downtime. That is having a huge consequence on the way many of us feel. And, you know, I think I start the book with this story about this 16-year-old boy who I saw maybe 6 years ago. This chap called Devon. This was in a typical conventional medical practice, you know, in our National Health Service. I have 10-minute appointments. And it was a Monday afternoon surgery. Okay, we call them surgeries. They're just clinics, basically. Okay, a Monday afternoon clinic. I had about 3 or 4 people in the waiting room. I was already running a little bit late. And this 16-year-old boy walks in with his mother. I open up the file and I see there's a letter. And basically on the Saturday, this guy ended up in the ER because he tried to harm himself. And there was a letter there from the ER doctor saying, hey, Dr. Chashi, look, this is what's happened. We assessed him. He was safe to discharge, but could you please start him on antidepressants? So he's there. He's with his mum. I sort of know the family anyway because I've been looking after them for a period of time. And I thought, okay, what's going on here? Why is this 16-year-old boy from a seemingly well-balanced family that I've never really detected any issues with before, why has he ended up harming himself in the ER department on the Saturday? I thought, I just can't start on an antidepressant. I need to figure out what's going on here. I just couldn't do it. So I spent maybe 10, 20 minutes with them. And I thought, hey, I need a bit more time. I said, guys, look, are you able to come in tomorrow morning at the end of my morning clinic? And I'll spend a bit longer with you. And I said, yeah, sure. So they came in the following day. At the end of that, I thought, okay, there's many factors at play here. But one thing really worries me, which is his use of social media and his smartphone. And I said to him, look, Devin, would you be interested in me helping you reduce your usage? And he's like, well, is that going to help? I said, well, look, I don't know, but I don't think it's helping your current mental state. Would you be willing to give it a go? And he was at, that low ebb. And he said, yeah, sure, if you think it's going to help. So we agreed for the first week that just for 1 hour before bed, he'd switch off his phone and he wouldn't go on the internet. He comes about 7 days later. And I said to him, how are you doing? And he said, well, Dr. Chatterjee, I'm still not great, but I feel less up and down in the day. I'm sleeping better. I just, I've got a bit more energy. Things aren't quite as bad as they were. I said, okay, so you've already seen that that's having a little bit of an impact. What if we increase that a little bit more? And over the next few weeks, we increased that to 2 hours in the evening before bed and 2 hours in the morning where he doesn't go on his phone. Mm-hmm. Okay. He's starting to feel better. You get it? Not cured or anything, but significantly better. Then I thought, okay, we've tackled that. He's getting that bedded in. I also then went into his diet. I said, hey, what are you eating? It was a typical teenage diet. Lots of highly processed, sugary junk food, snacking all throughout the day. And I said, hey, Devin, did you realize that actually the food that you eat can have an impact on your mood? He's like, really? I said, look, what happens when you have this food? Right? Deadly serious. Yeah. I'm like, when you're eating this food, this high sugar food, you're going on a blood sugar roller coaster. So what happens? You're having that in the morning before school. Mid-morning, your sugar's crashing fast. That's not just an energy problem. That's not just a sugar problem. That is also a mood problem. Because when it crashes, that your stress response goes up in your body, adrenaline, cortisol go up, right? This will have an impact on your mood hormones. It's like, are you kidding me? I'm like, no, this will be playing a role here. So because he understood why I was asking to make the changes, it wasn't just me saying, you've got to change your diet. I drew out a little graph for him. I explained to him. He goes, okay, that makes sense. Show me, right? So I explained what he might be able to do. Take some nuts with him for those snacks to keep his blood sugar stable throughout the day, those kind of things. It wasn't a perfect diet. He didn't go full on Mediterranean, right? Mm-hmm. He just made enough changes. And then he started to improve again. Bit by bit, he's getting better. And then I stopped seeing him. Suddenly, he doesn't come in as much. I'm getting on with my busy practice. And then I come in about 6 months later, and there's a letter on, as part of my mail. I'm going through, I open this letter, and it's from Devin's mum. And he says, dear Dr. Chatterjee, I just want to thank you. You've completely changed Devin's life. He's happy at school. He's interacting with his friends. He's joining local clubs at the weekends. He's just a joy to be around. I just want to say thank you. And I've learned so much from that case, Rich, because I thought, wow, yes, I think there are emotional issues as well. But simply by tackling 2 of those 4 pillars, mm-hmm. right? The relax pillar, where I helped him reduce his social media use by helping him understand what was going on. I helped him improve his diet by maybe 20, 30%. It's not full on, right? He started to be empowered enough to see how that impacted his lifestyle. So this is a 16-year-old boy. He was at a fork in the road, right? He could go down one path. I'm on my antidepressant. I've got depression, right? That's the label I've got. No doubt he would have been put on a repeat prescription. Mm-hmm. He could still have been on that 5 years later. But at that moment, he took another path. He now has empowered himself. I really helped him to understand how the environmental choices he makes impacts his mental health. And I very much hope that that's going to keep him in good stead going forward, because if things get tough in the future, he will know, actually, there are some things I might be able to do which are going to help me. And really, this is what I'm saying. This 4-pillar approach is deceptively simple, right? We think, where's the real medicine? Where's the cool stuff? Right? This is the cool stuff. If you get this stuff right, everything gets better. Yeah, if you're lucky, you can reverse your disease, but you can certainly improve the way you feel. Pretty much everybody can improve the way they feel, whether you've got a disease or not. If you're just someone who wakes up tired every day and needs sugar and coffee to get you through each day, these principles are going to help you. Mm-hmm. If you've got type 2 diabetes, it's going to help you. It doesn't matter, because these are universal. I can't invent the principles of good health. They're the same principles that existed 100 years ago. I can't come up with a new concept for a book and say, hey guys, I've got the secret, right? I don't.
It's the secret no one wants to tell you that you've never heard before. Yeah, I mean, I think the most powerful thing in all of it is getting the lights to go on in the patient, like by making, like a lot of the book is about like, look, let's just these baby steps, right? And if you can just get a patient to implement one or two of those, the lights go on, they start to make that connection between how they're living and how they're feeling, and then they're invested. And then you're basically catalyzing that person's journey for the rest of their life. They're going to go off and, continue to grow and explore and refine and change and do all of that, on their own with guidance, of course, from people like yourself. But it's that empowerment piece that I think is so important. And I think it's a fundamental paradigm shift in the doctor-patient relationship from one of, the traditional paradigm of like, I'm the expert, you're going to do what I tell you. And we're not in a partnership here. Like, I'm the authority, to, okay, let's sit down and have a chat. And like, we're a team here. And what can we do together? Where it fosters that sense of self-determinism.
Yeah, it's a partnership. It's got to be a partnership between doctor and patient, because those days of that paternalistic relationship, they're over. They're gone. I mean, there's still a certain generation who expects that.
Yeah, there's still, most of it is that way still.
Most of it is that way.
You're the rarity still.
I think I've always been slightly odd in the head, because I've never seen it like that. I've always kind of wanted to have that partnership, that conversation. But
it didn't start that way for you. Like, we didn't even tell the story about how you got into all this.
Yeah, it didn't. So, well, it's interesting that, because I reflect back now on my career, and you're right, it didn't start that way, but on some level it did. So, to put it in perspective, is I qualified for Edinburgh Medical School, and I thought, I've got all the skills now I need to get out there and make people better. Great, this is what I've trained for. Mm-hmm. Let's go.
And make dad proud.
Yeah, exactly. And family proud and all this kind of stuff that, I grew up with. And I rock up and I'm, doing acute medicine. And then within a couple of years, I'm, leading the cardiac arrest team in the hospital and doing all the kind of cool acute stuff that you think being a doctor is all about. But actually, I reflect back and I think even then, I don't think I was deeply satisfied. I saw how powerful modern medicine can be for acute problems. People walking in through the door, sick, and you give them whatever you need to give them, and suddenly they're transformed. Just incredible. So you don't really question at the time. You don't even know yourself. Hey, we go to med school really early in the UK. We don't do a degree first. So, when I qualified as a doctor, I must have been 21. 22.
Oh, really? Wow, that's way earlier than in the States.
So early, something like that, maybe 22. And I think now, I didn't even have the life experience to be able to understand what people were going through. But the point is, I was, I was okay. My career was going fine, and I was doing my specialist exams, and I thought, yeah, okay, fine, I'm going to figure this out. And you've alluded to, my personal story, which is that, I had already made the move to general practice because I really felt that we were just missing the big picture. Mm-hmm. We were just getting so down rabbit holes in one area without seeing how everything is connected. And I was working in general practice, and, we just had our first child. My wife had breastfed him for the first 6 months as per the guidelines. And as per, we thought we were doing the best thing. And I'm not saying we weren't doing the best thing, but we were, we're a pretty health conscious family. And we went on holiday to France and the Christmas holidays. And I can still remember it so vividly that we were staying in my friend's chalet in a place called Chamonix in France. And they weren't there yet. We were just there. And my son hadn't been well throughout the day. He had a bit of a cold. And for some reason, my wife didn't put him down in his cot, which is in the basement. Mm. It didn't feel right to her, maternal intuition, whatever you want to call it. She didn't do that. And I remember that she was sitting, it was a big open plan, living room and kitchen, and she was sitting there. And I think I had the kettle on, and she just called out to me and said, Rongoody, stop moving. Come, he just shouted out. I just came over, my son, his arms had gone back. He was rigid and he just stopped. And, I thought he was choking. I thought maybe he was choking on his mucus and his phlegm. And, my medical training was sort of like, okay, so I turn him over. I try to clear his airway.
He's not breathing.
He's not breathing. It's just, frankly, I tried to clear his airway. Nothing was happening. And in that moment, I wasn't a highly qualified doctor. I was a scared dad. And I froze, right? I was just standing there. What's going on? I've got to figure this out. And my wife had said, look, we just got to get to the hospital. So we rush into the car. I almost kill us all because we are on this little slope and the car skids because I'm just so panicked. We end up in the hospital, which isn't very far. And you could see when we got there that the doctors were worried because, for people who don't know, a 6-month-old child can have a convulsion. It's called a febrile convulsion if they've got a fever with it. That is not actually that worrying. That can happen in that age. He had no fever. So you could see the doctors were really panicked as to, okay, what's going on here? Why has he got no fever? Because that's the common cause. Mm-hmm. They were sticking a line in his neck, all kinds of stuff. Then he had to be blue lighted down the mountain to the big mountain hospital because we were in a little resort.
But did they get him breathing?
They got him breathing. They gave him diazepam to get him going, and stop all that. And I wasn't allowed in the ambulance. I had to follow it in a car. And I was just panicked what the hell was going on. No one knew. They took bloods from him. He had 2 lumbar punctures. We thought we were going to lose him that night. We were absolutely so scared. A few hours later, the doctor comes into the room and he says, Dr. Chatterjee, we know, he's, we know what's happened. What's happened? He said he's got a very low level of calcium. And because of that low level of calcium, he's had a convulsion. So what we call a hypocalcemic convulsion. I was like, okay, fine. They didn't know why at that point. They just said, okay, this is the cause. So to put it in perspective, the normal calcium level on that particular test is 2.2 to 2.6. Even if we see it at 1.9, we consider that very low. His was 0.97. So his was tanked, barely compatible with functioning. That's why he had his convulsion. So they gave him an intravenous calcium infusion. This is what modern medicine does best, right? Fix that acute problem. But then what happens, I think about an hour or 2 later, I can't even remember the time, it's all a bit of a blur. But he said, we now know why. He has no vitamin D in his body. He's very, very low. So because he has no vitamin D, his calcium has dropped low. So to cut a long story short, and I'm sorry to have labored the point, it's just, it gets quite emotional when I think back and I still can't clear that out of my head.
It's terrifying.
And in a nutshell, this is a fully preventable problem, right? My son nearly died from a preventable vitamin deficiency. And his dad, as a highly qualified specialist, general practitioner, immunology, honors degree, all this kind of stuff, all these labels, right, which I wasn't able to prevent that happening in my son.
But how would you even know? I mean, if he's breastfeeding, you would presume that he's getting all the nutrients that he needs. Well, the story gets deeper
because ultimately, I now know that. And again, people are going to listen and go, well, why weren't you putting him on vitamin D maybe? And the reality is that, that is just not at that time. And even now, it wasn't that common knowledge that a lot of kids need vitamin D, particularly in the modern worlds. There are guidelines that all children need vitamin D drops, and he wasn't getting them. But I've got to say, about 4 or 5 weeks before this happened, I was doing some reading. I was coming across this in my own practice. And I thought, I wonder if my son should be on vitamin D. So what I did is I phoned my wife from work and I emailed her a protocol. I said, hey, babe, can you just make an appointment? Can you just go and see the doctor and just ask? Because we get told, it's drilled into us as medical doctors in the UK, we're not to make decisions on our own family. It's considered bad practice. You consider too close. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to do the right thing. So she printed it off. She went to see our GP. And the GP said, and he knew that I was a doctor. And he said to my wife, you could have just made this up on Word. This is rubbish. You don't need to do anything. You're doing the best. And so she phoned me and said, this is what's going on. I said, okay, let me do a bit more research into this. Because I wasn't confident enough to make that call myself, right? Whereas now with hindsight, I should have just done it myself, bought the drops over the counter and given them to him. But I didn't, right? And, I've gone through years of trying to figure out why I didn't do that. And, having a lot of guilt attached to that, which is a separate issue, but I think quite an important one, because that guilt, see what happens, he's in hospital, he nearly dies, modern medicine saves him. But then I'm reading about vitamin D and I think, well, this is a critical vitamin for your immune system to develop. This is a critical vitamin for his bones to develop. So he was diagnosed with rickets as well, right? A Victorian illness that he's now got in the 21st century. And actually, on a side note, in the UK, rickets is on the rise, which is just incredible.
Oh, wow. I would not have thought that. I didn't think anybody got rickets anymore.
We're going up in the UK every year. I don't know the US stats, but it's going up. And what happened in that moment was that I thought, well, maybe this is the reason he's got eczema. Maybe because eczema in some way is related to your immune system, having an element of dysfunction in it. And instead of just putting creams on to suppress the symptoms, it's like, well, maybe this is why he's got it. So I felt so guilty about this that I said, right, I'm going to figure out how to get my son back to optimal health as if this has never happened. And that was my drive, right? I became obsessed. I'd be going on the internet, I'd be reading about vitamin D and nutrition. And as you start reading, I start to come across a whole ton of science that frankly I had never seen before, that I thought, why do I not know about this?
Right. That's the shocking thing.
Why do I not know about this? I learned more. I thought, right, I'm going to figure this out. I spent a ton of money, of my own money. I started going out to America. I started coming on conferences, on courses, with the goal to get him better, right? And I've got to say, I'm very, very thankful that my son is thriving. He's 8 now. He's happy. He has no skin problems. He's doing well. He's sporty. I really feel that everything I've learned has helped me get him back to full health. Okay.
So it wasn't just the instance of going to the emergency room and treating it. This was something that required treatment over a prolonged period of time to get him well.
But that's how you look at it. Modern medicine would say, well, he had a problem. He had a convulsion. Okay. We've identified that and fixed it. You're discharged now. Good to go. Okay. But we're not looking at what are the implications. How long was he low in that vitamin for? How much of an impact has that had on the development of his immune system? Right. And which that kills me to even think about that, what that might have potentially done already. What I know is that if you think about that threshold concept, even if there has been, an impact from that, which no doubt there has, I feel that I'm helping him optimize everything else that is possible to kind of mean that is going to have less of an impact. But here's the key. The science I learned from trying to get him better, yes, I helped him. Then as a family, we started applying it in our lives, right? Then I started applying it with my patients. And for the first time in my career, I was excited. I thought, I'm getting people better. I'm getting them off their medication. I'm actually understanding what the root cause of their problem is and how to get to it. And it changed my career. And I, it's in some ways, Rich, if this had never happened to my son, would I be doing what I'm doing?
Yeah, it's that classic thing of, the worst thing that happens to you is the silver lining that creates something beautiful out of it.
I mean, silver lining for me. Was it a silver lining for him? I don't know, but I can tell you,
be all right.
I think so, and I can tell you one thing I'm starting to do now is I'm really working hard on myself to let go of that guilt, because actually that guilt, I think it served its purpose, and I think now that guilt is hindering my ability to be as good a father as I could be.
Yeah, you can't keep punishing yourself and wear the hair shirt.
Yeah, and he doesn't want that either. He doesn't want his dad to be guilty, and it's, for me, it was that transformative experience, and I kind of, I used to justify it to myself. I thought, okay, because of that, I've learned this. I'm helping my patients now. Then I get this BBC One show, this primetime show, which goes out to 5 million people a week in the UK, and then, 70 countries around the world, where I can showcase this so to millions of people around the globe, how no matter what your condition is, we can improve it with these lifestyle recommendations. And I thought, maybe that's his gift to the world. Maybe in some ways that's what was required to give me this drive to do what I do.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. So, wow, my head's gone, but that's...
No. It's an amazing story, and I'm sure he's going to be fine.
Hey, he is going to be fine. He's incredible.
In the context of your practice and all these people that you treat and see, like, what is two questions really, but the first being, like, what is the number one thing that people struggle with the most? And I know you don't want to, like, sort of parse the differences between these 4 pillars because of this, delicate interplay between all of them. But, where are people going wrong the most? What's the most chronic, persistent condition or stumbling block that people face in your experience?
Yeah. What is the most... Well, I think the most common stumbling block, you're right. I mean, I think you got to take those 4 pillars individually, because in different people, it's going to be a different one. But if I had to really pick one, and this is different from if I had come on the show 5 years ago. I don't know if you were doing the podcast 5 years ago.
I was.
Yeah. So if I was here 5 years ago, I would have given you a different answer. Back then, I would have told you it was food. But now I'd say it's stress. I think the majority of people I see are just stressed out. They're busy. They just got their brains full of stuff. There's no quiet. There's no stillness. There's no respite from the noise. And I'm finding more and more I'm going there a lot earlier than I used to. So I'd say that's probably the big one for me.
That's the one that I struggle with the most.
Hey, me too.
And as somebody who's driven and as an athlete, like, I just, my whole frame of mind is push. I can do more. I can make it better. And I just dig myself into a hole, which is why I woke up this morning, not feeling so great,
But it's about saying you can do more. You can do it all, right? But you gotta have a stop point. You gotta schedule in these stop points because these days, it doesn't matter what you do, your work is never done. There is always something else you can be doing. So I rather romantically look back to time 15, 20 years ago. And I imagine that people would, and I'm sure I'm overly, I'm sure it wasn't quite like this, but I kind of imagine that, let's say a working couple would come back and they might sort of have dinner with their children, let's say, for argument's sake. And at some point the children would go off to bed. And then it would be like, okay, let's chill out together. Let's maybe put the television on. Let's watch something together. There wasn't the ability to go, right, that's done. Now I can get on with more work. Now I can actually open up my work emails. Now I can catch up with what I've not done yet. Now I can get ahead for tomorrow. I don't think, certainly for the largest part of our evolution, we didn't have that possibility.
No, when you went home, you were home.
You were home. Work was at work. You're home now. You chill. And
nobody could reach you, and nobody would unless there was some crazy emergency.
Yeah, exactly. So because we've got the ability to do these things, we always feel we can do more. Mm-hmm. So that's never going to go. Your to-do list is never going to be done. If you think you're ever going to tick it all off and you're done now, that ain't happening. There's always something else. There's always an email to get back to. There's always your Facebook to check. There's always a DM you just got on Instagram that you could get back to. It's endless now. Or that WhatsApp group you've been added to that you got to respond to, right?
Well, we all have like 20 inboxes now.
Yeah. And people can't get you on one, they get you on another one. So you just got this constant bombardment. So I think that stress piece, and a lot of people don't realize that is a big risk factor for disease, but that will even negate you. That will even stop you from losing weight. Right? People can't get their heads around that. But so many, particularly I've got to say women, okay? And that's because I'm going from my experience. I'm not saying this affects women more than men. What I am saying is, in my clinical experience, I've seen a lot of women suffer hugely with stress. And, a lot of them are, really caring. They don't put themselves first. They put their children first. They put their partner first. They put their parents first. They do everything for other people, and they've got no time for themselves. And what happens is, because they're wired the whole time, their cortisol levels, which are our primary stress response hormone, those levels are high. They're persistently raised. But if they are persistently raised, it means your body thinks it's under attack. So it holds on to weight. And I've helped women get rid of menopausal symptoms I've helped them get rid of their weight problems when they've jumped from diet to diet for years and they keep hitting a plateau and they think, what's the right diet? This is the wrong diet for me. What's the next book I can buy? What's the perfect diet? And I say, hey, this ain't a dietary problem. All of these are pretty good diets. Your mind never switches off. And just by some simple stress management techniques, the weight starts coming off or the menopausal symptoms start getting better. So stress impacts everything. And, I see it in my practice. I saw it when I did Doctor in the House. I saw it in people's lives. And, when I mentioned people sit back and let's say a couple are sitting watching television in the evening, there's another issue there, which is now, if we play that scenario out, let's say the couple do want to watch something together, right? Actually, it's very common now for people to be on their own devices because we can personalize everything. So I don't need to watch what my wife's watching. I can watch my favorite show. Yeah. She can watch hers.
Yeah.
So that whole
we're all having our own personal experiences on our own.
Yeah. So we're together in the same room, but we're not together.
Right. We're not having a shared experience.
And that plays out in other areas. So, many people come and see their doctor about their sex life or lack of intimacy and these kind of things. And the classic cliche now is as a husband and wife or whoever, two partners are in bed together, right? But they're both on their own devices. Uh-huh. So they're occupying the same physical space, yet actually they're in their own world, their own emails, their own Facebook messages, their own Netflix shows. And that opportunity for intimacy, that is going as well. And, as a doctor, these things come up into my practice every day. People are complaining about this. And again, this technology is so great on so many levels. But if we don't rein it in, it's affecting all aspects of our life.
Yeah. It's crazy to think that, but it's so true. I mean, sort of what you're saying on some level is like your device is making you fat.
Yeah.
That's the way to get people to pay attention.
That is the way.
And then, so you could talk about all the other things, but it really is amazing. These crazy times that we're living in right now. We're having to deal with all this kind of stuff that even 10 years ago was non-existent.
Yeah. And what I really want to make clear, Rich, if people are listening to this and go, yeah, look, I get all that, but it's just too hard. I would say, look, maybe something they've heard that we've already spoken about or something they might read about, right? Just pick something small. Just pick something small and start there. Maybe it's simply that you are one of these people who go on your phone and in your bed at night, right? What if you didn't bring it into your bedroom? Or what if 20 minutes before bedtime, you thought, okay, I'm just going to put this off now, okay? Start there. I live in a house and we keep our phone chargers downstairs, right? And the rule is, but we don't always stick to it, right? But the rule is that we leave our phones downstairs, Judge. We don't bring them upstairs into the bedroom, right? Now, I'm human, right? We don't always stick to it.
Are you on call, though, at times where you have to have the phone nearby?
No, the way I do practice now, no, I'm not. So I don't need that. But look, I've worked with people who do, right? So I'm like, okay, fine. On those nights, you do it. I get it. But what about the other 6 nights in the week where you're not, right? Because we can all make those justifications. You can make the justification that I run an online business. I've got to be connected at all times.
Well, you can always make excuses for whatever it is that you're trying to wiggle out of.
Yeah. And the thing is, when we say we're trying to wiggle out of it, I think this is where the empowerment comes in, because the first thing we've got to do is people have got to want to change, right? They might be listening and going, yeah, but I don't want to do that. If people aren't ready for that, they may buy my book, right? And they may read it and do something for a week, but then they're just going to put it on the shelf and they'll go back to their old habits.
Or more commonly, they'll buy the book and give it to somebody who they want to help, without appreciating the fact that if that person they're trying to help doesn't want to change, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Because people think that they can will people into that wanting to change mindset. And that's a recipe for disaster.
Since I got into this world and since I've suddenly seen the light, and trying to sing it from the rooftops at first, I've learned that, what? You cannot make anybody make these changes, particularly not your family.
No. And I'm sure you get, as I do, tons of emails. Hey, so my mom, my brother, my husband, my wife, whatever. They need to understand this. How can I make them understand it?
You can't.
You can't.
You can't. You just got to. I say to people, and this is what I try to do. I try and lead by example. Not because I'm trying to be an example. I'm just going to concentrate. I've realized it's enough work to do it myself, right? In this crazy modern world we live in, I'm going to focus on that. And bit by bit, hopefully people around you will, if they're interested, you might just, spark that little bit of interest. And I'll tell you one place this has played out recently, which is probably not what people would expect me to say, but because I've got 2 young children, now that they're at school, it's always tricky for me to sort of, knowing what I know, I can't control everything about them anymore. And that's just part of growing up, right? But, often there's a culture at schools of like sugary junk food and all this kind of stuff, which, really on one level I find very frustrating. And initially when my son started at school, it would stress me out. Like, this is crazy. What am I going to do? And then my wife and I decided, we're just going to focus on doing what we do. And at the end of that first year, they went on a school trip and people could bring their treats in for their school trip. So what we did is that, again, we're not trying to make any judgment on anybody else. We're literally always cautious when we're talking about children. I genuinely believe that every parent is trying to do the best that they can for their child within the context of their life and within their health belief system. But we felt that we want to keep feeding him healthy, nourishing food, and we made these, I say we, my wife, let's be really honest about this. My wife made these beautiful fruit kebabs. I think there was mango, strawberry, it was just these colorful kebabs, and he took them in. And then at their lunch break on their school trip, everyone's having their stuff and he's having his fruit kebabs, which he loves because he thinks that's a treat. I'm allowed all this super sweet fruit today. And we went to pick him up and his teacher said to us, I was just incredible. I think we're going to institute this now as a practice for school trips. We're going to now do these fruit kebabs for everyone. We thought that was fantastic. And I really learned a lesson that day. I thought, this is incredible. We're not telling other people what to do. I don't feel it's my place or our place to tell other people what to do. We're just focusing on what we do. And that has been observed. And other parents had asked us as well, said that's incredible. And now other people are starting to adopt that with their children because of what they saw us do. And again, it's that same principle that applies, which is you can't make someone else change. You just got to focus on doing what you're doing. And it is hard because if you have had a health revelation by changing your lifestyle, yet your partner is not, all you want to do is tell them, say, no, it's, you do this. But I found it doesn't work.
No, it doesn't work. And it's tough. I'm sympathetic to people that are in that situation. Like I was lucky enough to have, a wife who was super supportive. I don't know that I would have made the changes that I would have been able to make them stick without that kind of support. So it's very difficult. And on the thing about kids, we're very similar with our kids. My wife is an insane cook. She makes amazing food. It's the food that our kids prefer, but we don't make rules with them about what they can and can't do when they leave the house. Like I'm not that concerned about whether my daughter is going to have a piece of cake at a birthday party. What I am concerned about is her habits 10 years from now and what her default settings are going to be.
Yeah, exactly.
And that comes through setting the example and through constant education and using food, the kitchen, the farmer's market, the grocery store, all of that, the cooking, teaching them how to make certain things. It's all like a homeschool recipe to instill, those ideals around food that I think are so important. And it's about serving the long term.
Yeah, and you've got much more experience than me as a parent, so I'm always happy to hear.
And each kid's different.
Each kid's different, and I'm realizing more and more I need to let go. And at some point they're going to push back and experiment, and you cannot. It's very hard to fight societal norms.
But if you don't give them anything to push back against, the impulse to rebel is diffused. Right.
Yeah.
So if you're not saying like, this is, if you're making all these rules, then when they get to a certain age, they're like, I'm out of the house. I can break the rule.
Yeah, exactly. And we become acutely aware of that recently and really trying to modify our behavior around the kids because of that. Mm-hmm. And, I mentioned before that I met Michel Poulain,
right.
I don't know if you've,
I don't know her.
But he's a Belgian researcher who I think went out with Dan,
Mm-hmm.
initially to sort of help do all the research on the blue zones with Dan. And I was lecturing with him in Guernsey. In Guernsey, they were looking at Guernsey to see, could this qualify potentially as a blue zone? I don't know where they've got up to with that. But very kindly, the people who were organizing this arranged for me and Michelle, to go and visit some of Guernsey's centenarians. I remember we went in a taxi and we went to this chap's house. He was 102 years old. I remember we got out of the taxi and I knocked on the door. And he comes up and he answers the door, which in itself was amazing to me because as a doctor, I do home visits, right? That's something we still do in the UK. If someone phones in and they can't get in, we go. And obviously it's a self-selecting population. People are sick and ill, generally frail. That's why they're calling the doctor. But I've never had one of those patients will very rarely open the door for me. And normally there's a key lock or a carer lets me in. This guy rocks up and he lets me in and we go and we sit down and there's a cup of tea made for us and we sit there and we talk. It was really interesting to talk to him about his life. And, he said until he was 95 and started seeing doctors, he was great. And once he started seeing doctors, his health went down, which I found super interesting on one level. But he spoke to me. I can't remember the name of this thing, but he said, one of his favorite treats was this Guernsey loaf. It's like a mixture between an English cake and a French croissant. I can't remember the name of it. I was really interested. I thought, okay, because I'm trying to work out what's the secret here, And I say, that's great. How often would you have that? Would you, sort of most days or at the weekends? It's like, oh no, Dr. Chatterjee, Easter and Christmas. We just have it at special times of the year. I can't have that every day. And I thought that's the key. It's not about, and I think this is consistent in all these blue zones. It's not about deprivation. These guys have sweet treats. They don't have it every day after school or every mid-morning coffee break at work, right? They have it now and again as a celebration time, as a treat. And, that's why the recommendation I make in the book is to denormalize sugar, right? I'm not saying, look, we crave sugar. If you were trying to avoid sugar in this modern food environment, I think you're setting yourself up for failure, really, because it's going to be incredibly challenging, I feel, to long-term completely avoid sugar. I think we need to denormalize sugar. It can't be the everyday norm. It's got to be the occasional treat. Mm-hmm. That's the key with sugar.
But I think you have to be specific about what you mean by occasional, because I think people have different different definitions of that. And I do think, and I think you'll agree with me on this, that there's something to be said for completely cutting something out like sugar to allow your microbiome to adjust and your physiology to adjust. And there very well may be some discomfort because we are addicted to these kinds of foods. And when we remove them, there's a craving that ensues. But if you can kind of weather that, you can get to the other side and those cravings dissipate and your relationship to those foods that once triggered you and held so much power over you no longer do.
Rich, I absolutely agree. Look, I go through this process. If you want to go cold turkey on it, I talk people through how to do that, because for me, that's the approach I would take, because you within 4 or 5 days, you start to learn how good you can feel and how, frankly, hooked you are on this stuff.
Right.
But some people that's too much for. So I also take them through a step-by-step process that they can take if they want to go more gradually. But I agree. Often people will say, I'm addicted to sugar, or, yeah, but I've got a sweet tooth. You know what? We've all got a sweet tooth. We crave sugar. But if your norm is to have sugar in your cereal, even if you're not adding sugar, the inbuilt sugar in your cereal, and your bread that you have in your sandwich at lunchtime, potentially in some of those breads, and your ready-made pasta sauce in the evening, right? Your body gets used to sugar. Your taste buds adapt to what you're giving it. I remember a few years ago when I used to drink tea, when I first started drinking tea, I had sugar in it. And I remember giving it up. And the first few days, I couldn't stand the tea. I thought, this is awful. And then I got used to it. And 3 weeks later, I was at work and I picked up the wrong cup of tea. And it had sugar in it. And I had to spit it out because something that I could have drunk 3 weeks previously now felt horrendously sweet to me because our taste buds adapt. So,
yeah, I've had the same experience.
So I do feel that it's much better to have a period of, let's say, 2 weeks where you go cold turkey. Yes, you may well go through some withdrawal symptoms. Okay.
People don't like to hear that.
People don't like to hear that, but, we can willpower things for a week or two, right? Maybe for 4 to 6 weeks, that's harder, but we can willpower for a week or two. Most people can. My big tip for that not only for that, my big tip in general for making lifestyle change, if people are serious about lifestyle change, no matter what that is, I would say make your home a safe zone, right? If you're trying to avoid certain foods, do not bring them into the house. And the reason is because in the 21st century, in most places now, if you step outside your front door, you're having to exercise willpower everywhere you go, right? You want to fill up petrol or gas in your car, right? You've got to walk past all the junk in the petrol station. You want to get a coffee, right? In the UK, it's like this. You want to buy coffee. You stand in line, right? You walk past all the pain au chocolats, all the pastries, all the muffins. You may well have mentally thought, right, I'm going to say no. You go to pay. The barista will then say to you, hey, sir, would you like a pain au chocolat with that? You're constantly being questioned and pushed. So I'm saying that's going to be hard.
No, and ultimately willpower is going to fail you over time.
So don't use up your willpower in the house, right? I know you will come back one day tired, stressed out, underslept, right? And you will crave something sweet. And this happened to me a few weeks ago. I was, going around the country, talking about the book, talking to people, trying to promote health. I was exhausted, right? Sitting there at home, I really feel like something sweet. I open the cupboards. There's nothing. There's olives. There's nuts. I don't feel like olives and nuts at the moment. Yeah. And you know what? After a little while, that craving goes.
Yeah, you're pissed for a minute, and then you're like,
exactly. Yeah, but that's it. But if I had that bag of potato chips, then I would have smashed through it because that's how I felt. And I really feel that it's such a key point. Control the environment that you can control. You're setting yourself up for winning. Well, I talk about these little glute exercises that I do with a lot of my patients that really help me get rid of a 10-year history of backache. I do 3 to 4 minutes of them a day. But do you know when I do it? I wake up, have a bit of downtime in the morning. I very mindfully and particularly weigh out my coffee beans. I weigh it all out, a little bit obsessed with it. I pour the water in, and then my timer goes on for 4 minutes. And as the coffee's brewing, my stepper's there in the kitchen, and I do 3 minutes of glute exercises. So it's inbuilt into my, I keep the stepper in the kitchen, right? I'm sure my wife's not a huge fan that it lives in the kitchen, but the point is you've got to set these things up so that you can make the lifestyle change easy. It ain't that hard, man. Honestly, it's not that hard.
Right. The teachable kind of takeaway is construct your environment to be conducive to making the healthy choice. And that's, what you do in your home is kind of a microcosm version of what Dan Buettner talks about in the macrocosm. Like he always is saying, look, we can browbeat people into trying to exercise and eat well, but ultimately you're not going to really solve the problem on like a civic level, on a social level, until you create infrastructures that are conducive to that. You have bike paths and you make sure that there are no, terrible foods in the schools, like all this stuff, so that everything is sort of out of reach. It's inconvenient to make the unhealthy choice, and everything is set up to be conducive to driving you towards making that healthy choice. And you can do that in your home. And to the extent that you can control your environment at work or at play, whatever, you have the ability to control, that's going to ultimately pay big dividends long term.
Yeah, that's the key, right? But we look at these blue zones, and I don't feel, Dan would clearly know better. He spent a lot of time out there, but I don't feel that these guys are necessarily trying to be healthy.
They're not trying to do anything. Their environment is just conducive to them living long, because they have to be moving, and they're just living proximate to their family members, and they're a part of a faith community. Like, it's all just set up to promote that without them having to give it a second thought.
They don't need to go to the gym.
They're not going to the gym.
Exactly. They're just to get around, to get their food, to go and to do whatever they need to do. They need to walk. They're doing this stuff. And that's why I think overall there are two pieces here. One is the education piece, right? Okay. The education piece is, books like yours, books like mine, so many great books out there to try and help people understand what they might be able to do. But that's only one part of the piece, right? One part of the puzzle. The other part is the environment, right? Ultimately, the only time we're going to get the real public health gains that are going to transform your country, going to transform my country, are when there is infrastructure set up so that people find it easy to make those choices. That, I posted a photo of this recently on my Instagram. I was in London on the Underground, and I was in a station, and there was, I think, 2 sets of escalators, and then in the middle, there was a set of stairs. Nobody on the stairs, everyone on the escalators. And again, I try and always take the stairs where I can.
Always take the stairs.
Yeah. And again, I'm not trying to sort of sit on my high horse.
I know. How dare you?
I get it, right? I
you
get
think
it.
You're so much better.
And yeah, I really don't. I genuinely don't, man. Honestly, it's not my thing but you see it when people come off I flew in to LA a couple of days ago. And you get off, you go through customs and everything, and then there's those stairs to the luggage claim hall, and there's an escalator. Nobody's on the stairs.
Yeah.
We've just been sat
I just did that last week. I know exactly what you're talking about.
We've been sat on our butts.
I was the only one on the stairs.
Yeah, we've sat on our butts for 12 hours, and it's easy because we're tired from the flight. It's easy to stand on the escalator, right? And I get it. And again, I'm not criticizing people for doing that, but this is the point about the environment. Even if there was a sign at LAX, right? And we know there's good studies that show in workplaces, if you put a sign on the lift, if you put a sign there that, have you thought about taking the stairs? Yeah, there's a UK paper. I'll send you the link. It's incredible. It makes a difference. You just get people thinking. It makes a difference, right? That's wild. So my UK publisher, Penguin, right? So a few months ago, I gave them a well-being tour. The whole of Penguin in London, I went to talk to them about the 4 pillars, basically. Mm. And their offices are on the 8th floor of the building. So every time I've gone there, I get escorted up there. Everyone takes you to the lift. And at the end, I made them a challenge. I said, guys, look, obviously you guys personalize this to your own lives, but there's an opportunity here. You all work on the 8th floor. You've all been at this talk. It's much easier to make change in groups and communities together. What if those of you who were able to, what if from tomorrow morning, not next week, not next January, what if from tomorrow morning you all try to help each other take the stairs each day? How would that be? And there was a mixed reaction a little bit, but people were like, okay, that sounds pretty reasonable. Right, I tracked this, right? The next day, all of them took it. Okay, 100% of the people who attended. 4 months later, 85% of them were taking it 4 times a week.
That's pretty good. I would have thought the attrition would have been higher.
Really?
No, the drop off.
Yeah.
Meaning. Yeah.
No. Again, I was surprised, but that really teaches us how much of a role community plays. Because if it's left up to an individual, that hey, you go out for lunch and you have to come back and you say, let's take the lift. What if your colleague says, yeah, I know, but why don't we just take the stairs? Right? When you do it in a group together, you start to make those changes. And I've got emails from so many people in Penguin saying, hey, I didn't realize the impact it had. I feel better about myself. I'm more productive in the afternoon. My relationship with my wife is better since I started doing that. I'm sleeping better. And I'm not kidding you. This is not me exaggerating how powerful these changes are. It's these little changes, bit by bit. These small changes become our new habits. These new habits become our health. You got to start somewhere. And it doesn't matter. These guys weren't changing their diets, right? All these guys did, right, was take the stairs together 4 times a week. It's 8 blocks of stairs.
Yeah.
Right? And people are emailing saying all these kind of great benefits. And what that does, that then makes them feel better. Then they want to make a dietary change. Or then they think, I wonder what else I could do. Maybe this 15 minutes of me time isn't all woo-woo. Maybe I can actually do this. Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm passionate to say one-on-one with someone, I will try and find a spot that I can really connect with them where I think, okay, and find something that they can agree with. Agree to with me. The difficulty I had with writing a book is I really believe in a personalized approach. So I thought, how the hell do I write a book for the general population that personalizes it? And the way I've tried to do it is by give people options, give people so many options, real life options, right? Not that I fabricated, but that I have seen over nearly 20 years that patients have reported back telling me this works in my life. Right? Not what the research paper says. Yeah, that's all in there, right? People want to read the research. I can give them that. But what I think I'm most proud of is that this book is making people want to make lifestyle change because they think, yeah, I can do that. Wow. I relate to that person he's just told me about. Man, I'm going to start there. And it's been out for a few months in the UK, and it's really transforming the way people are thinking about health. The 4-pillar framework is almost, I won't quite go as far as saying it's in common parlance yet, but a lot of people are talking about it. A lot of doctors, a lot of healthcare professionals, a lot of nutrition professionals are raising the concepts in their little 10-minute consultation and then giving them the book. I had a psychiatrist contact me last week, a psychiatrist saying, hey, Dr. Chatterjee, can you talk to your publishers? I've actually bought 30 copies of your book and I've given them to 30 of my patients, but is there any way we can get a discounted rate? Yeah. Right? Because this is not just about type 2 diabetes and obesity. This is about mental health problems. This is about gut symptoms. This is about migraines, insomnia, depression. It's about all these things. These are the chronic diseases. This is what I'm seeing day in, day out as a doctor. And this is what I'm seeing, that frankly, a one-pill solution, it ain't working. For the bulk of these people, it ain't working. And I'm sorry to go on. I know this works. I've seen this work. And I just want people to give it a shot, give it a chance.
The beauty of it is the accessibility and the fact that the ask is so digestible. It's like, what is the one thing that you can change? What's the tweak that doesn't take up any time and doesn't cost any money, that can ignite you and get you engaged in your life in a different way? And allowing that person to explore that, take ownership of it, and go on their journey.
Yeah.
So the call to action, and we gotta land this plane. The call to action to everybody listening is, what does that change for you? What is that one small thing that you can agree to that can begin to catalyze that shift?
Yeah, absolutely. It really is about that one thing. That's the start. And I don't know, Rich, what would be the one thing be for you?
I think for me, there's a litany of areas where I could use some improvement, but I think, I have challenges around eating food late at night that I know it negatively impacts my sleep. I have issues about turning the devices off, within a given time frame before going to bed. Those are two big ones. And I have a tendency to push myself too hard in work and in play that leaves me depleted. And so I don't carve out, I get uncomfortable when it comes time to carving out like relaxation and reflection time.
Yeah. And I'm not dissimilar to that, if I'm honest. I've recently, particularly since I've looked at all the circadian rhythm research from California, on, not eating too late at night, which is just incredible. I've really tried to limit that, but I struggle to carve out time for myself. I will sometimes, particularly when traveling and your time zones are all off.
You're all messed up.
You start looking at devices. But I wonder, I know you're interviewing me, but I can't, it's like this whole, what I do in a consultation is I say, well, okay, these are things you're struggling with. Perhaps I can also commit to something at the same time. And then maybe for the next 7 days, we can sort of make a commitment to each other. We're going to try and do this one thing. And I have done that with patients before. Yeah. So if you want, what are we
going to commit to here?
What about devices before bed? How do you feel about that?
I can do that.
What do you reckon? What's achievable?
90 minutes before bed.
You think 90 minutes?
I think I could do that.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So it's what I call a no-tech 90. We're going to do it?
We're going to do it.
Okay, I will also commit to a no-tech 90.
Is it doable for you?
It is. I think so. I went through a really good patch a couple of months ago where I was doing it all the time, and then I've fallen into a few bad habits. But this has renewed me. This has been like, okay, I made a commitment to Rich that I'm going to do it. So I think I can do it as well.
All right. We'll check in with each other.
Yeah. And anyone who's listening and wants to let us know if they can do something as well, they should let us know, right?
Right. Yeah, for sure. Like, why don't we make it a hashtag or something?
Hashtag NoTech90.
NoTech90. All right. There you go. NoTech90.
Yeah. And let us know when you hear this. Let us know how many people are doing it. Not in the 90 minutes before bed. Do it the next morning.
Right. Cool. Final question, and then I'll let you go. And I ask this of all doctors that come on the show. If you woke up in a parallel universe and you had become an American citizen and been appointed to become Surgeon General, what changes do you put in place?
You know what? I should have prepared an answer like this. I've heard your podcast so many times, and I have just not. So,
on a kind of, whether it's regulatory or legislative, like what kind of systemic changes would you like to see in health or the practice of medicine?
I would say that culturally, I'd like legislative changes that prioritize health. So I would like it to be almost in legislation that schools and hospitals don't sell junk food. Right, don't stock junk food.
Let's start there.
So even that would be transformative. And another, I guess, systemic change would be to really push companies and this culture, particularly I think you have it in America more than any other country, this work hard, constantly be on call, always be available on your phone, always be available. We need to take a leaf out of like a German company. I think Volkswagen did this recently, where their employees physically cannot access their emails in the evenings, weekends, and on holiday time. They're just locked out. Wow. Right. And again, it may not be Volkswagen, I think it is, but one of the German companies, and it's very common in Europe now for this to be implemented. I think that would be a huge thing for America if that corporate culture would change, where we accept, hey, you're going home now. I do not expect my boss does not expect me to answer an email till 8:30 tomorrow morning when I'm back at my desk. I think even that, because I think many people have got that expectation. They don't want to lose their job. They're like, oh, I need to reply to my boss. Even those small things would have a huge impact.
Yeah. Beautiful, man. Thank you so much.
Rich, the pleasure's been mine. I'm just such an incredible honor for me to be here. I 5,000 miles away. I'm going up and down the country on the train to London. I'm often listening to your podcast. I'm often learning a lot from what you glean from your guests. So I just want to thank you for the opportunity to come and talk to you myself. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's very cool to hear. Excited for you. Excited for the new book. The book is in the UK. It's the 4-Pillar Plan. You can see it here on video. And in the US, they have changed the title. It is How to Make Disease Disappear. Why did they change the title?
They've Americanized it. They said it's got to be more.
It's a totally different cover, the whole thing.
The content's the same.
Yeah, the content's exactly the same. So depending upon where you live, those are the titles. Pick it up wherever you buy fine books and come back and talk to me sometime.
I'd love to.
Cool. Thanks, if you want to connect with Dr. Chatterjee, what's the best place to do that?
I would say Facebook or Instagram. It's at Dr. Chatterjee. It's probably the best place to get hold of me, and we can have a conversation on there, or possibly my podcast, Feel Better, Live More podcast. People can listen to that as well. And
you can get that on iTunes and all
get
the
it
places,
on usual places, yeah.
Cool. Are you doing any public speaking events that are open to the general public?
Whilst I'm here?
Yeah, by the time this goes up, is there like a schedule on your website or anything like that?
Yeah, we're putting it on the website on drchatterjee.com. It's also on my Facebook page, facebook.com/Dr. Chatterjee. There's an events section there where all my events are there. So I love speaking to the public. So if you want to come along, please do.
Awesome. And final thing, are you going to take us out with a little guitar? We didn't even talk about the fact that you're a touring rock star.
Oh man.
You took like a sabbatical from your medical practice to tour with your band?
I did, yeah. Well, actually,
what kind of music do you play?
EP, yeah. So that was a long way back.
What's the name of your band? Here.
I did it under my own name. The solo EP. It was under Rongan. It was back in the days when I had long hair. I did my.
Did you? Did you have long hair?
I did. Yeah. I feel pressure. I don't know what to play. Do you want to? Well, I'm in.
It's up to you.
Well, I'm here in. I think what feels right. I'm here in the hills in California, and yeah, this will be a cover. Is that good with you?
Good.
Feel free to sing along, man.
All right. You don't want that.
I've been wandering down the road trying to loosen my load. 7 women on my mind. 4 the one who want me to, the one who stole me and once, so she's a friend of mine. Take it easy, take it easy. Don't let the sound of your own wheels drive you crazy. Lighten up while you still can. Don't even try to understand. Just take a place to find your stand and take it easy. Well, life is standing on a corner of Winslow, Arizona. Such a fine sight to see. It's a girl, my lord, in a flatbed full of sundown. Have a look at me. Take it easy, take it easy. easy. Don't let the sound of your own wheels drive you crazy. Lighten up while you still can. Don't even try to understand. Just find a place to make your stand and take it easy.
Bit of jet lag in the voice. Man, I've not played that in a few years.
All
Rich.
right, man, that was great. Little Eagles for California.
Absolutely. Hey, that's what I felt
Cool.
like.
Awesome, man. Thank you.
Until next time, buddy.
All right, peace, Lance.